Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is ShinoBazu, and welcome to another episode of Shino Shrine Picks. For those who are new to the show, this is basically the weekly roundup of what's going on in Dead by Daylight Shrine of Secrets, and I go through or go over the 4 perks that are in the shrine and let you know which ones are worth grabbing, which ones you should probably skip, and pretty much what you can use them with alongside of picking them up out of the shrine this week. But without further ado, let's just get right to the video. Okay, so first up this week, we're starting with the Survivor side, and we have one of my favorite perks in the game, Iron Will. For those who don't know what this perk does, basically every level of it makes it harder for the killer to be able to hear you, or essentially makes it so you make less noise when you're injured. As I said, it's one of my favorite perks, and in my honest opinion, one of the strongest Survivor perks in the game. It is probably one of the best perks in the game that does not require any other perk to work with it for it to be a useful perk. The only downside I would say to this perk personally is that I only feel like it's strong in its third form. More and more perks are getting to the point where they're useful even at tier 1. Although Iron Will I think is useful at tier 1, I only think it's worth running at tier 3, in which case basically you make no extra noise when you're injured as opposed to just having the sound reduced by 50 or 75%. Iron Will is one of, as I said before, one of Jake's main perks, but it works well with pretty much any other stealth perk, and in my honest opinion, if you're running a real stealth build at high level, meaning like rank 5 or higher, this perk is probably one of the keystones to making that build work, because although all the other stealth perks are really nice for losing a killer, the one thing most killers rely on more than their eyes is sound, and if they can still hear you, they'll still be able to find you. So Iron Will is, as I said, kind of the cornerstone of the stealth builds in Dead by Daylight as a whole. And as I said before, literally one of the strongest perks in the game. But that being said, one, I think it works really well with perks like Quick and Quiet. Quick and Quiet is basically, simply as you know, basically makes it so you don't make any sound. So getting hit and then being able to vault the window without making any sound means if the killer doesn't immediately get eyes on you, it's a lot easier for you to lose the killer or even just be able to slowly walk around the killer, simply due to the fact that you've broken line of sight and you're not making any noise, so you can't use sound to track where you went. Obviously, another follower for most killers in the situations, if you're sprinting, is going to be scratch marks, and thus why I think other perks that work extremely well with Iron Will are going to be Dance with Me, Lightweight, Poised, or Distortion. Anything that for any reason can remove your scratch marks for a period of time, along with like Quick and Quiet and them not being able to hear you, is going to be extremely powerful. On top of that, I think that versus the Nurse are the Spirit, who are 2 of the strongest killers in the game. Iron Will is probably one of the strongest perks to use against them. The main reason for this is both of those killers, more than any other killer in the game, rely on sound to be able to figure out your location while using their abilities. So if you're running a combination of Iron Will or Calm Spirit, or like I said, both, it is very hard for those killers to track you for a follow-up attack. That being said, they don't make you invincible versus those killers, but they are some of the strongest perks against them due to their reduced vision. If I had to pick from the Survivor side, I know we're going to get more into like the other perks, but whether this is the best perk in the shrine or not, if you don't have this perk and you haven't leveled Jake, I highly recommend you grab it. It's 100% worth its value. It's worth its weight in gold. If I had any other final caveat is, in the only Dead by Daylight tournament that I've actually competed well in, I was only allowed one perk, and my one perk was Iron Will, and I was able to, wouldn't say stunt, but basically elude some of the best killers in the game with full builds. And literally the one thing that like let me stand out among all the other players is the simple fact that the killers couldn't find me because I had Iron Will. So in the hands of a trained player who knows how to like handle, their anxiety and everything else that comes with playing this game in a high tense situation, Iron Will is probably the one perk you need to make so many clutch plays, it's not even funny. Okay, next up on the Survivor side, we have Breakdown. Now, for those who don't know what Breakdown does, basically, whenever you're hooked by the killer, whenever you get off of a hook, whether it be by someone saving you or you pulling yourself off, that hook is destroyed, and you can see the killer's aura for, I think, 4, 6, and 8 seconds. The time isn't super important, to be honest. The big thing about this is the fact that the hook gets broken, and you get to see the killer's aura so you don't run face back into him. How long you see his aura isn't super important, to be completely honest. That being said, I think it's a cute perk, but to be honest, this perk only really has a place in Sabo builds. It's relatively good for new players because it does help you whenever you get saved by someone from running straight back into the killer and dying, so it can be helpful for that. But realistically, in terms of like any form of competitive play, the only way you actually see this perk being useful is going to be in Sabo builds. So the perks I would say that would synergize well with this would be like Sabotage, No Mither, Unbreakable, Tenacity, Empathy, essentially any other perks that would make a Sabo build strong. The only other thing I think of is maybe Kindred, but Kindred doesn't really synergize with it. It's just another hook perk, so you're getting 2 perks out of being hooked. You know what I'm saying? So there's a little bit of synergy there, but not really. But this perk is nice, it's cute, but it only really has this place as an option inside of a stronger build, and it's not the cornerstone of that build. As we were talking about Iron Will earlier, as opposed to where like Iron Will is what makes most stealth builds work, and Breakdown is just kind of something you could rock within the Sabo build to kind of complement it, but isn't really a strong perk on its own. A big reason why I don't necessarily think Breakdown is really strong is any perk that is designed to do something after you've been put on the hook basically means after you've already been captured and essentially killed. It's one of those things, like once you've put on the hook, you've lost. So any perk or synergizing around that, Decisive Strike, Deliverance, Kindred, Breakdown, anything that revolves you having to be on a hook first, I don't think is necessarily a strong perk, simply because you have to have already been caught, which already puts you at a disadvantageous situation. And when I think about it realistically, and I think of the advantages you gain from it, breaking the hook after you get pulled off is nice, but it's only going to act with the amount of hooks they have in the game is only going to help you in a Sabo game. Seeing the killer when you get pulled off the hook is nice, but it's only going to help you in a handful of situations. More than likely not, if the killer's close enough and is like camping the situation or camping where you're at, seeing his aura isn't going to do anything. And if he's not camping, he's probably across the map, in which case seeing his aura isn't really going to do anything. You'll know not to run straight back to him, which is useful, but in those situations, I would have rather either been able to pull myself off the hook, had my teammates be able to see each other, so more than likely there's a better chance of me getting saved, or I'd rather have the protection from Decisive Strike to make sure that I can't go back on the hook after I get pulled off. Any of those 3 things revolving around the hook would be far more useful than just seeing the killer's aura and breaking the hook that I came off of. In most situations. Not all, but most. But that's my thoughts on that. Okay, now we are over to the killer side of the shrine, in which case first up we have Infectious Fright. Now this perk came out with the Plague, and I actually feel like this perk is extremely nasty. Now, to be fair, I don't see a lot of killers really making use of this perk, and to be completely frank, I think there's a good chance it may be getting a buff. Whether or not I agree with that, I don't know, but it is extremely strong. 2 killers, obviously any killer that can down survivors quickly is going to get a huge benefit out of Infectious Fright. But before we get into who benefits from it, what Infectious Fright does, for those who don't know, is essentially anybody who gets downed, or when you're chasing survivors, when you down a survivor, any other survivors within their terror radius will reveal their location to you. I believe it is 4, 6, and 8 seconds. I could have to double check the timing on that, but regardless of like the time of you revealing them, being within your terror radius generally already means that they're within 32 meters. So even just for 4 seconds inside 32 meters is extremely powerful and extremely volatile. This is an extremely strong perk on Hillbilly, but it's also really good on killers, especially like Nurse or Spirit. But again, going back, especially on Nurse, and the main reason for this is Nurse can just down you so quickly. Any killer who can down you quickly, a lot of people don't run a lot away from a Nurse. A lot of people will try to stealth around away from a Nurse, even when a Nurse is chasing someone else, simply because they don't want to be found or they don't want to like have the Nurse switch targets. Same thing with Hillbilly. Being able to know exactly where someone is for 4 seconds within 32 meters of you is insanely powerful. Nurses also, and this is again of Hillbillies, killers who like to slug and can slug well. This is extremely strong for slug situations, especially if you're running something like Knockout. When you knock out a survivor, then you know exactly where the only person who knows who that survivor is, at which point you know exactly who your next target should be. The only reason why I feel like this perk doesn't get used enough is the simple fact that it does have to be, obviously you have to be in terror radius of people, and so you do have to essentially be near other people to really make use of it. But out of perks that help people snowball or that help killers snowball, this is probably one of the strongest ones if you're playing a killer that's willing to slug and can benefit from slugging multiple players. It's a really scary perk. Again, like I said, I think the only reason we don't see it as often as I think we should be seeing it in play and higher tier play is the simple fact that we don't see nearly as many nurses as we used to. And as strong as it would be for Hillbilly, it's not something necessarily Hillbilly needs. But oh my goodness, Infectious Fright is infectiously frightening. All right, I'm done. We're done with the puns. I'm sorry. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, and last but not least, we've got Rancor on the killer side. So, for those who don't know who Rancor is or what Rancor is, it is a spirit perk, and essentially what this perk does is it makes you obsessed with one survivor. While you're obsessed with the survivor, every time a generator is popped, you get to see the aura or the location of all the survivors on the map, all survivors, for 3 seconds. So essentially the same way that a generator kind of pops and lights up the screen, when you're using Rancor, the survivors' auras will pop up and light up the screen. So if you're mid-chase someone and you barely lost them and someone pops a generator, it'll let you know exactly where they are so you can finish them off or finish the chase. This does not count as aura reading though, so it is not countered by things that block aura reading, like being in a locker or using distortion. That is a very important thing to note about this. Hiding in a locker does not hide you from the Rancor proc. The other effect of this ability is every time a generator is popped, your obsession sees your aura for 5 seconds. So for 5 seconds, your obsession knows exactly where you are for basically every time a generator is popped. This is more to notify them that they have Rancor and why they're your obsession and that you have Rancor, and it's probably to give them some defense against the secondary ability of Rancor, or I guess the third ability of Rancor, which is at the end of the game, when all the generators are completed, your obsession gains the expose effect, and you are able to instantly kill your obsession in this situation. So once the last generator is done, you were able to instantly one-shot and more your obsession, regardless of anything else in the map. It's basically you gain no ed versus them, but there's no way to remove it. So just pretty much once the last gen's done, for the rest of the game, you can one-shot them no matter what, for the no ifs, ands, or buts. One of the things that I think a lot of people, I guess, sleep on about this perk is the tracking. I don't think it's one of the best tracking perks in the game, but I do think it's a slightly stronger Bitter Murmur. For those who don't know what Bitter Murmur does, every time survivors finish a generator, you can see their auras for I think 8 seconds after they finish the generator, if they're within 16 minutes of the generator when it's done. And then when the last generator is done, you can see all survivors' aura for 8 seconds, which is really strong. But I think Rancor gives you more than enough information to be able to make use of it, and is all survivors on the map as opposed to just those who are by the last generator every single time. If I had to say what this perk was for, this was when Decisive Strike was still extremely popular, and there was a lot of killers complaining about essentially having that one survivor who was your obsession. You would chase them for the entire game. They would finally catch them when the last gen popped after they got adrenaline, and either they would have adrenaline and get away, or you'd barely catch them. You'd catch them with no ed even though they had adrenaline, and then they would just de-strike you and leave. This was, I don't want to say this is 100% the devs' answer to it, but this was 100% the devs' answer to it. Instead of, when you know that one survivor who's got D-Strike, you know their obsession, you know you can't pick them up, and this is obviously D-Strike's changed since then, which should have been what they did in the first place, but I digress. When you know you have that one toxic survivor that you're going to want dead, you know he's going to have an obsession perk, you know he's going to be your obsession, you know you're not trying to deal with his BS, this is the perk to kill that one player. The only way they make this fair is by letting the survivors see you every generator, so to let them know that they have Rancor and they need to hide. But realistically, If you've got that one cocky survivor, you know he's going to have D-Strike, and you know how he's going to play, and it's going to take you all game to catch him. If you're really feeling that salty, then this is the perk to run to kill that survivor. You don't have to hook them before mooring them. You don't have to worry about people getting rid of your no-ed totem beforehand. It's literally you versus them, and it's not if you're halfway decent at the game, it's not if you'll catch them. Generally, it's a win, and that's literally all this perk is for, and all this perk is good for it. In terms of synergies, it's an obsession perk, but doesn't really synergize really well with any other obsession perk in the game that I can think of. The only thing I can think of is it might synergize relatively well with the new Dying Light, simply because if your target knows that they're Rancor, they're probably going to go out of their way to avoid you, which means you'll probably spend more time than not interacting with other survivors, which means that you can probably more easily gain stacks of Dying Light because your main obsession is going to be avoiding you and trying not to get hooked for an extended period of time. That being said, Rancor was created also before D-Strike changed with who the obsession was. That was another change they made to D-Strike. So Rancor can change throughout the game. It's in a weird place. Just like with Breakdown, I have a good feeling this perk is going to get looked at pretty soon. I'm sure it's not high on their to-do list, but I'm sure the perk's going to get looked at, and they're probably going to come up with a way to make it more integrated into like an actual playstyle as opposed to just something you use to kill one person to make it more beneficial for the rest of the game and things like that. But who knows? We'll see. We'll see. Okay. Now that I've told you guys everything these perks do and the perks that they synergize well with, now's the part of the video where I tell you guys whether or not I think a perk is worth picking up, or which perks I think are worth picking up. At which case, the start it all off, it's going to be the perk that I opened up with, Iron Will. In my honest opinion, especially in the current state of the game, at high level play, low level play, at all stages of the game, if you can get the tier 3 version of it, Iron Will is probably the single strongest survivor perk in the game. I think the only perk that decently counters Iron Will would be Bloodhound, which is a very rarely ran perk by killers. And if a killer's not running Bloodhound and they can't hear you, it is very easy to lose even the most skilled players if you're running Iron Will. To this day, Spirits, Nurse Mains, pretty much any killer worth half their weight in salt is going to tell you that one of the hardest perks they have a problem dealing with is Iron Will. And even though it does technically get soft countered by Strider, even Strider's counter of it is still not strong enough to make it not worth running. In Strider games, I feel like it would be more important to have as opposed to less important to have, because of the simple fact that Strider would allow the killers to be able to hear you better, and so having Iron Will basically gimps the one thing they were planning on using to track you down. But yeah, put it out there. First and foremost, Iron Will, in my opinion, is probably the single strongest survivor perk in the game. For your own personal survival, if you're in a team setting, I'd go with Borrow Time. But outside of a team setting, 100%, Iron Will is strong against just about every killer in the game. The one exception would be maybe Doctor, in which case now he's hard countered by Calm Spirit, which is Jake's other perk. But as I said, it's an extremely good perk, 100% worth running. And if you haven't already picked it up by leveling Jake, I highly recommend you grab it this week from the Shrine. Next up in the pick of perks I think are worth grabbing is going to be Infectious Fright. The main reason for this is Infectious Fright is super nasty. Not nearly enough killers run it. I think it's extremely strong on Nurse and Hillbilly. Nurse, I'd almost go as far as saying that it's overpowered on, but there are a lot of killers who could make use of this. Any killer who can down a survivor quickly could highly make use of this, whether it's Trapper, Nurse, Hillbilly, Leatherface. You know, if you can down a survivor quickly and you would benefit from leaving a survivor on the ground for whatever reason, obviously Plague is also another one who picks this up. Spirit, especially well, because she focuses a lot on hearing and getting those aura reading. Anyone who can benefit from slugging a survivor and going after the next one would benefit from Infectious Fright. I personally highly recommend it. It's something that's going to take some practice learning how to use, but like, once you get used to using it, it's one of the strongest perks in the game. It's just going to take some learning how to use. Again, not necessarily up there with like whispers and like the best perks in the game, but like one of the most important things I think for killers to learn how to do, especially once you start playing at a higher level, is learning how to snowball. Because obviously, as much shit as I give the game, this game is still very survivor-sided if you're playing against coordinated players. And unless you learn how to take advantage of mistakes survivors make to snowball a game in your favor, it is very easy for things to get out of hand for you. And the one sign of a good killer is being able to essentially not just wait for survivors to make mistakes to snowball, but to take things that they've done right and turn those into snowballs. And Infectious Fright is one of the best perks, in my opinion, helping you be able to do that. Why am I hovering breakdown while I'm talking about Infectious Fright? Sorry about that. Next up, out of them is going to be Rancor. Rancor, like I said, Rancor is just for killing that one really annoying survivor. However, it is a relatively decent tracking perk, especially if you're learning a killer or leveling a killer, and you don't got whispers and you don't got ruin, and you don't got things to slow down the game. It's a way to help make sure that you at least have one kill or remove one survivor from the equation endgame, so you've kind of got that in your back pocket. But on top of that, it's a relatively decent tracking perk. I've used it several times and caught multiple people who barely gave me the slip, and then they gave me the slip and someone popped a generator when they were about like right behind a rock that I wasn't paying attention to, and then it was just GG for that person. So I mean, it can be really powerful. It's not something I necessarily rely on, and it really is more just an FU to those really good survivors that are hard to catch who would always run the obsession perks. But with that being said, and that knowing that now, I would just say the best thing for you to do is, like, if you like it, or if you don't have anything better, or if you don't have Noed or something like that, it's something fun to swap on if you're just trying to learn a killer, learn how to find survivors, things like that. And like I said, it is pretty fun. Knowing that your obsession is going to be deathly scared of you at the end of the game is kind of a fun feeling, which I'm assuming is what they were really going for with that perk. And lastly, we've got Breakdown. With Rancor, I'd say this is probably the fourth perk I would get. Breakdown literally is only really good in Sabo builds. You're not really doing Sabo builds unless you're playing with friends. This is probably one of the best perks to run if you're doing a solo Sabo build. That being said, realistically, Sabo is something you do as a squad, not necessarily as a solo. This perk is really great for Sabo situations, but you know what I mean? If you're not in a Sabo situation, which most people aren't majority of the time, this perk doesn't really serve you any purpose. Again, it is really good for making sure you don't run right back into the hands of the killer. But again, in those scenarios, I would personally prefer to either have D-Strike or Deliverance or Kindred or literally any of the other hook-related perks as opposed to having Breakdown. So that's just my thoughts there. It's a take it or leave it. I wouldn't necessarily rush to get it. I'd save your shards for something more powerful down the line if you get it at all. But I mean, hey, if you really want to do Sabo with friends and you want to like have a little bit of flavor, it is fun for that reason alone. But again, that's my thoughts on that. Either way, all in all, that's my thoughts on this week's Shrine. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you guys have any questions about the Shrine of Secrets picks or anything like that, feel free to, bug me, leave it in the comments down below. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to give it a thumbs up. And if you think of a friend who might enjoy or is new to the game or wants to learn more about it, share this video with them. It'll help them a lot, help them understand the game, what perks they should be looking forward to, and stuff like that. And more importantly, it does a lot for the channel, and I'd really appreciate it. But either way, I won't keep you guys any longer. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys want to bug me about this or anything else, or about the Demigorgon, which I know is out now and everyone's super excited for it, please feel free. I stream just about every night on Twitch. If you want to talk about it, feel free to come by my stream, say hi. I'd love to see you. But until next time, my name's Shinobazu. I'm your gaming ninja, and I'll catch you guys later, alright? Deuces.